Hello and welcome to Items On, the podcast where you get to follow your favorite Melee players and personalities both on and off the sticks. My name's Ethiopium, and today our special guest is Sp1nda. Sp1nda, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm recovering from a little bit of a riptide sickness, but I'm feeling a lot better today, which is nice.
That's nice. I was a little under the weather too after Riptide, which sucked because it was masked, which I thought was a great idea. Shout out to the Riptide TOs, but rats, you know how it is in the water park.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get straight into it. Usually how I start these episodes is I ask people what they were doing before they got into Smash, what time period was it, and how did they find the Smash scene?
Yeah, so the first time I ever played Melee, I was very, very young. It came out 2001, and that's when I was born. So I think we got the game around I want to say maybe 2005, so I must have been 4 years old. And my older sibling and I would play. Once in a while, we would just sit down and play Melee. And I still remember that time because I really liked Pichu and I really liked Kirby. And there's just something about the game where even when I was 4 years old, I was like, how do these characters up B? How does Pikachu do 2 up Bs? I remember that specifically because I would see the CPU do it and I was like, how do I do that? I have no idea what I'm doing when I'm pressing these buttons. But the first time I ever beat my older sibling, that feeling was yes, oh, I feel so good. And it never really left my head because after we had long stopped playing Melee, I was still really interested in Smash. I would play Brawl online a lot when I was 10 years old. I would play Sonic and I would cheese people with spring and down air. That was my favorite thing. But that was something I did for a really long time. But before Smash, I wasn't really doing a whole lot, at all. I didn't do a lot in high school. I didn't do a lot in middle school or anything like that. Just because I didn't really find anything that piqued my interest. For a while, I played on a competitive Team Fortress 2 team when I was 12 or 13. And I loved the competitive aspect of games from then. Because Team Fortress 2, I wouldn't say it's like Melee, but there's so much depth to it that there's a really high skill ceiling, and I thought that was really appealing. But there was always something in me I wanted to have a chance to prove myself in a solo game. And when Smash 4 was coming out that I saw the Smash documentary and I was like, this is everything I ever dreamed of when I was a kid, for Melee specifically, because that was the game that always stuck out in my brain. So when Smash 4 was coming out, I actually rebought Melee and I started practicing that because I was like, okay, this documentary, this is really cool. This community seems really awesome. But I also played Smash for 3DS all the time because that was the game everyone was playing and all the kids at my school would play. And I think before school, we would all sit in the cafeteria at the lunch table. And I would always play Smash 3DS and I would always beat everybody. Everyone always really wanted to beat me, but I wouldn't let them. And that was my first moment where I was like, I want to try to go to tournaments and take this game really seriously. So that's kind of the story of how I got interested.
So how did you find the Smash scene to get into? Because, your interest was piqued via, the Smash documentary and playing with friends, but it's always that jump that you have to take to a legit tournament. And I was wondering how you found that.
So I used to watch every VGBC stream for Xanadu and all that stuff. And I remember they had a card on one of the streams that was find your local Smash scene. And it was for Facebook groups back then.
Yeah.
And I decided to look on Facebook. I decided to look on Smashboards. On Facebook, I didn't have a lot of luck looking by myself because I just kept finding dead Ohio Facebook groups where nobody was playing, Northwest Ohio or just in general the entirety of Ohio. And I didn't realize subregions for Ohio were so important back then, just to get in touch with the local active players. So I would kind of lurk on Smashboards and really just keep my eyes open for any tournaments that would be close to me. And it was always hard because there were not tournaments close to me. They're all like an hour away. And like, it's hard to convince my parents to take me anywhere near any of them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until like one day the stars like aligned and there was a tournament in North Canton called, it was originally called Your Lie in April, but it got changed to Freedom Biweekly because that was the road it was on. It was on Freedom Street. And it was one day in 2015 where I was finally like, Dad, like, can you take me to this tournament? Like, I don't know where exactly it is, but it's like right near where I live. Like, I could have walked essentially, but I had to ask him. And after that, I found like the local Facebook group. Back then it was Northeast Ohio and Pittsburgh, which they used to be a region that worked together a lot because we were relatively small and not that far from each other, like 2 hours. But just one day in April, I got my dad to drive me to this very small place. It was almost like it was in the back of a garage. And there were 4 really small rooms that we would cramp Melee setups into. And the lobby was also like pretty small. It was like some kind of card shop back then for like Magic the Gathering. It still exists now. It's just in a much better place with like an actual sign. Because the place we went to is now like for a country club. I like checked and I was like, wow, okay, yeah, that's probably better use for this tiny ass space. But that's how I like at least went to my first tournament and finally figured out where the local scene was.
And was there any point that you decided, all right, I'm going to go head first into this game, I'm going to start grinding? Or was that just from the jump, like even before you found your first tournament, you made that decision?
Before, I kind of understood that I knew nothing because that's what every, like, I would watch like a lot of YouTube guides too. I think there was some Ken guide and he was like, yeah, you're going to go to a tournament and you're going to do bad and you have to just accept that. So I kind of accepted that I was trash at Melee, and I was for a very long time. It took me forever to win my first set. But I went into it and I was like, I'm here to learn and I'm here to get better because I had this just like competitive spark in me because it just seemed like such a cool game and there were so many cool people that after my first tournament, I was like, okay, I want to sit at home and I'm going to practice Falco lasers. I'm going to practice wave dashing, all this stuff because I wanted to have that down so that I could actually have a chance against all these people.
That's really cool. I wonder, I guess a question leading off of that is, do you see yourself as a competitive person in general? Is that competitive spark something that you see outside of Melee as well, or only in the game?
Yeah, that competitive drive sticks with me like everywhere. I can't like pick up something and be average at it. It's like I pick it up and especially if my friends are into it, I feel like I need to get good at it. It's like that with everything. Like one of the first people I really started grinding Melee with was my friend Carson. He was very good at Guitar Hero, and I remember watching him play with his friends like at his house if they weren't like playing Melee or anything. And I was like, damn, I really wish that I could like compete with him in that too. So I borrowed one of his Guitar Hero controllers and I sat at home and I like grinded for a month straight to get to like expert level and to like try to beat all the songs on Guitar Hero 3. Just like I downloaded Guitar Hero 3 and put it onto my Wii just so I could do that. And then it was also like that with Tetris. Like they were really good at Tetris and I was already pretty good at Tetris, but I was like, okay, I want to like watch all these videos of people who were super good at Tetris and I want to try to do what they're doing. And it has always been like that. And even in random regular parts of life, like I will bet on like random sports games, or I used to help my friend Franco, whose tag was Pumpkin Butter when he was active in Melee. I used to help him bet on women's tennis when I was really following it.
Hell yeah.
Because he knew that I was the person like just keeping up with everything. Like I love being competitive about stuff in life. Just it's everywhere for me.
That's awesome. I love that. You were talking about how it took forever for you to win your first set. I would love to hear how that felt. What was the emotions going through you as you won your first set as a competitor, especially since you have such a competitive mindset?
So back then, I was so young. I was like 14. The first ever set I won was actually Project M.
Hmm.
And it was, I used Bowser against our local like Sheik player. His tag was CRL. He doesn't play anymore. But it was in PM and I played Bowser, and Bowser back then was like super stupid and just everything had super armor. And I think it was game 3, but I remember doing that and I was like, yes, I won my first set. I don't have to think about that anymore. So it kind of like rolled off my back a little bit, but it still felt really good because I was like, okay, like I can win a set after like what, like 3 weeks of going to tournaments. Even if it was in a game I wasn't really playing, I was like, yeah, like I can keep doing this. I can keep doing this.
Yeah, that it always feels like I feel like for me at least it was a burden off of my shoulders when I was like, all right, I can be here. All right,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I definitely resonate with that. I would love to touch on something that you said, which was you were 14 when this was happening. You started Melee and PM at a very young age, and I would love to hear how you felt growing up in the scene. What type of, I guess, what type of experiences did you have that might not be, similar to someone who starts like me around college age?
It was well, back then I was super shy.
Hmm.
Super shy. And back then the scene was a lot different too. In Northeast Ohio specifically, it was all players who had been playing for like, I want to say like the new players had been playing for 3 years at that point. I was the newest and like the most random because it was like a 14-year-old girl is coming to these tournaments now, and everyone was everyone was welcoming to me, but it was also like everyone kind of kept their distance too because it was like, oh, like this is like little girl at tournaments now, like what the hell's
Yeah.
up with that? And the attitude back then was also just so much different. It's hard to even really remember because things have changed so much. I just remember though I was really anxious a lot. It was generally hard for me to talk to people um unless they were like being really like if they were hyping me up or something.
Hmm.
It's because I was so shy, and Melee helped break me out of my shell, like because you have to talk to people and you have to put your foot down on some things and advocate for yourself. And I had never had to do that before in my life, period. Like this was during a time when I was so shy I would not order my own food like at a restaurant. I would make someone else do it for me. And I mean, at the very beginning, people, I feel like my gender didn't really affect things that much because everyone was just like, oh, cool, like we have this kid coming here. But like as I started to get better, there were people who were like, who had told me later, they were like, I hated playing you because I was like, I don't want to lose to the 14-year-old girl. And they would get mad if they lost to me, and like they'd be super just visibly frustrated. But I didn't let that get to me. I actually used it to like fuel me. I was like, yes. I was like, yes, I love being the 14-year-old girl that beats someone and makes them mad just because of I'm existing, you know?
Yeah. I would love to
So
ask a
yeah.
question on that, which is, did you have to learn to love that side of things? I mean, that I'm sure for some people that would be frustrating, especially at a young age, especially being shy, like you said. So I think it's very interesting that you're able to use it as fuel for your competitive conquests. And so I would love to learn your mindset going into these things. Was that a decision or was that more intrinsic?
I feel like it was kind of intrinsic to learn to love it because I really liked winning. And then if I saw someone get really upset that they lost to me specifically, I was like, I did that. I
Hmm.
made them upset. So it might be it's probably different for a lot of other like women in the scene, but I loved using that as fuel, and I didn't let it get to me for the most part. It wasn't until like I want to say like 2016 when I went to my first major that it really started to affect things, and I had to pay like way more attention to it cuz I mean, I was young. I didn't really care about women's issues. I didn't really think that it mattered. Like at the Big House 6, which was my first major, we had Smash Sisters was brand new. They had run it at Genesis that year. And me and another woman from Ohio, we managed to get really close because we were like the only two women like in the entirety of Ohio. Her tag was Dr. Green Thumb, and she was PR'd in Columbus, and I thought that was so amazing. I was like, wow, she's so good, and she'd she beats all these people and she has a similar mindset as me. So we go into Smash Sisters and we're like, yeah, like, why do we need this? I don't understand. Like, these women aren't that good at Melee. We don't need like an event for them. And like looking back on that, like that's so silly. Like that's obviously not why the event exists. But we go there and we're like, yeah, we're going to enter as like a joke. And me entering as a joke like changed the trajectory of like everything for me in Melee. And I had no idea it would do that because I entered the casual crew battle and I think I took like 19 stocks or something. And it was something just absolutely absurd.
Yeah, there's legends about that.
Yeah, there's legends. The videos are still up, I think. And if they're not, I have them saved on a hard drive somewhere because I was like, I can't let this go. Like, this is crazy. I was 15 when I did that. And literally no one had heard of me. Just some random kid from Ohio. I take 19 stocks in the casual crew battle. And then in a competitive crew battle, I think I take like what like they send me in and I take out like 4 people just by myself. And I think I was on the East Coast crew and everyone was just like, oh my God, like who is this kid? Like this is crazy. Like this girl is the future. Like everyone saw me and they're like, she's going to be the next big thing. But then I didn't win the crew battle like overall. I lost and I was like, damn, like I entered this as a joke and I just got like showed up by someone I can't like name by tag anymore, unfortunately, but she was so much better and I was like so stubborn, like cause at Big House I had my drive like to really go to tournaments and really try at that point because it was my first major. I got to meet so many people. So I remember actually money matched her afterwards and I lost 3-1 and I was like, damn, like she's just better. Like there are other women out there who are better than me and I can't just like come in here and treat things like a joke because there's serious competition. And I used that to like get better and everyone was so supportive that I was like, that I had to accept it and I had to understand that there were a lot of issues I didn't really understand yet because I was so young, but I would come to understand later.
Mm-hmm. A couple questions leading off of that because I think it's super interesting. Maybe a naive question, but I think an important one, which was, do you think that your perception, I mean, I assume the answer is yes. So I guess explain how you think your perception is different being a woman in Smash versus being a man in Smash, especially, you know, around that Big House 6 era where it was, you know, a little less esports, a little less maybe welcoming, and you were still young at that age.
It was so, it's hard to describe, but it was like I was receiving way more criticism and attention than I would have otherwise. That honestly, back then I like wasn't good enough to even warrant that. It was just that people knew my tag and they knew that I was capable of doing like one specific thing. And that it was a lot of pressure. It was so much pressure and like I was thrown into the spotlight and everyone was like, oh my God, Sp1nda's so good. Like she's going to be so good one day. Like she's going to have this meteoric rise. And I was like, internally, that would like freak me out because I was like, okay, well now I have pressure. Now I have to prove things. Now I have to do this. Now I have to do that. And I think like there's like young kids in the community now, like OG Kid, for example. Mm-hmm. He has to deal with that probably to a similar extent that I did. But the fact that I was just like a young girl, I think made it a million times worse. I was pretty abrasive and just like sassy and just like kind of a dick sometimes back then, just because I was a teenager. Like every teenager is going to be like that.
Yeah. And
I was held to a much higher standard. Like if I said some shit, if I was talking shit, way more people would get upset and be like, what are you doing? Like there was one guy from Cincinnati where one time I was accused of like colluding in a tournament, which was ridiculous. I did not collude in that tournament. I didn't collude. What happened was Carol like sandbagged to me by playing other characters, but I beat him. Mm-hmm. Like he could have beat me with those characters. Like that was his decision. He can do whatever he wants. And this one guy was like, just because you're a 15-year-old girl doesn't excuse you from this shit. Like you're a role model. You have to act like one. And I would always like blow it off and like still talk shit. But like it did get in my head. I was like, maybe he's right at some point. Like maybe these people are right. Maybe I'm too abrasive. Maybe I need to get my shit together. And like that type of just mental barrage, I feel like there's like no young men in the community that have really had to deal with it the way that I did. No, and I don't want to sound like conceited by saying that.
No.
But even if I go back and I look at stuff where it's like, I think I took a game off the real thing and I tried to post a clip on the Facebook group and everyone was just like, oh, nice. You read like 5 missed texts in a row. Like you're totally as cool as Dempt now. And I look back at that and I'm like, shit, people were giving me a really hard time back then. I didn't even really remember. Like I knew there was some people, but it was like the majority of people that they would give me a lot of shit. And it was so much pressure that a lot of times after tournaments, I would just be like too upset to try to interact with anybody because I was like, I can't like prove myself. I'm not good enough. So it was mentally pretty tough for a teenager to deal with all that.
That's really interesting. Where do you think that stems from? People, trying to downplay you or people putting that extra pressure, that extra perception on you. Do you think that just stems from like just not knowing better or ignorance or jealousy? I don't know. Like, where do you think that comes from?
I've talked about it with a couple different women in the community. Back then, we didn't have like Magi. We didn't have nearly as many like good female Melee players. So I think it was partially like, oh, this girl's here and like she's the girl, and of course everyone knows her as a girl. They all want her to win, so they would automatically like cheer against me or something, or just like give me a harder time. And it's like a subconscious thing for some people. And in other cases, it's like they're too nice because I'm a girl and they're trying to like compensate for like the bullshit. Mm-hmm. But it's so artificial that you can see right through it. Mm. Or it's just people who they don't realize that they're being like an asshole about things. I always feel like there's 3 different types of people who they will like give you shit for something like that. And it's like the people who are unaware, they're doing it subconsciously. The people who are just like way too nice and they don't realize how that comes off. Or they're just ignorant. They don't really know yet. So I don't know. I think it comes from that specifically. And I don't know. I think there's just like, there's 3 different types of people that really seem to like, I don't know. I feel like there's very few people that go outside of that box. Mm.
That's really interesting. That is really interesting. I guess another question was, you talked about how it was tough as a teenager to go through these things in the scene. Mentally, how did you learn and grow to still be, the competitor and the community person that you are today? I mean, I'm sure that had to take some type of mental realignment or reassessment on how things are going.
Well, for quite a while, I actually like leaned into it almost like a little bit too much, because after Big House 6, I was pretty driven. So, I mean, I was grinding Melee like way more, and even though the people around me were like, oh, Smash famous Sp1nda now, like now you're gonna get so much better than us because you have all these top players. And like this was before like net play, so I don't know why people would say that to me, because I'm still here, I'm still in Ohio, and I still have to practice with all the same people. But I started really practicing, and it was Phil who like started doing analysis, and he would analyze my sets just because I was like his favorite player at the time. He wanted me to succeed. And that helped like open my eyes. And like I was excuse me, I was not a natural at Melee at all. Everything I did, I had to take notes. I had to analyze things, and it was so hard to just like understand Melee in my head. I would spend a really long time just trying to objectively say, okay, Sheik did a ledge stall and then did a bad ledge hop fair, and I up smashed it. That's why I won this interaction. And it was hard to conceptualize that for the longest time. But I was really driven just because I loved the game so much. And I loved that even though the scene was way more dominated by men back then, I loved that I had an mostly even playing ground, at least when I'm just playing the game, to like prove myself and prove that I could be better than a lot of different people. And it was just that drive inside me. Like, even if I was like super down on myself or if the pressure was too much, I couldn't get over the fact I was like, I want to be ranked locally. I want to be better than these people. I know that I'm better than these people, but I'm not being rated appropriately. So it turned into this cycle of like really wanting to prove myself. And if I would prove myself a little bit, people would be like, that's not enough. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it 10 times better so that you can't doubt me next time. And it was like this just constant cycle. And it was, I don't know exactly how I did it. Every time I do something good in Melee, I almost feel like, wow, I can't believe I did that. I have always had that feeling, and I don't know why, but at some point I just learned to like trust myself and trust my instincts in order to just get better and to keep going to tournaments, to keep competing. And it was also just like, I learned so much about myself from pouring so much of myself into it, especially under a lot of pressure. It was just like a combination of all these random things that kept me like in the scene, even when it got tough.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I noticed something that you've been saying, a phrase, which is I needed to prove to myself, or I needed to prove to people. Is that like a feeling that you have just in Melee? Is that something that you feel like you have to prove yourself both in and out the game? And if so, how do you deal with that pressure that you put on yourself?
Honestly, like sometimes I don't deal with that pressure on myself, like outside of Melee at least, because it's like when I was learning to drive, I learned to drive kind of late, and like that's like a stereotype for Smash people. So I was like, oh man, like I'm falling into a stereotype. Like I need to learn to drive and get my license already. I remember Ohio has a maneuverability test where you set up cones and you have to like go through them. I was doing that and I grinded it for like hours just because I was like, I can't fail this test. I need to get my license on the first try. And I would literally like, sometimes I would like break down if I couldn't get it right. I was like, oh my God, like, why can't I just drive through the cones? I think it's just like, I think just forcing myself to do it. And like, if I feel too bad, taking a pause and coming back to it and continuing the grind, just the repeated interaction with these obstacles helped it like numb my brain so that I could keep doing it and keep, just doing as good as I can. But it's honestly something I'm working on, just trying not to put so much pressure on myself all the time to just like prove something. Mm-hmm. And there are now times in life where I don't feel the need to prove anything, and I know myself and I know I'm good enough in different areas. But for most of my life as a teenager, I was like, I need to prove this. I need to prove this. I need to prove this.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, that's definitely something like as you grow, you get more confident in yourself and who you are. It helps a lot for sure. So I definitely resonate with that. I wanted to touch on something as well, which was you were saying that you got help from Phil in sort of like lessons or in sort of like analysis, right? And it's interesting because he has his hand in a lot of like great people, and I think it's just really awesome. Yeah, it's just a legend. So it's really like cool to hear like just people from all over the country just helping out other people just for the love of the game. I guess my question is, who are other people that were influential to you coming up the ranks?
So it was after Big House 6. I think I got the attention of literally everyone that was in the original Smash documentary, which is, looking back on that, that's just insane to me. Like, Prague is the reason why I got put into an ESPN article, essentially, because he knew I was going to Genesis, and Genesis is a whole other story because I got flown out there without having to pay anything. But Prague wanted me in this ESPN article, and Wife voted for me in the Genesis compendium over Zane, which is one of the craziest. Like, I kept that like in my pocket, and now that Zane is like the #1 best Melee player, it's just like, yeah, Wife picked me because he was interested to see what I had to offer when I was just like a new kid in the Melee scene. And there was also Milk Tea, who I met when she was playing then. I always wanted to play friendlies with her and just like talk to her. because there were a lot of women in the scene who were like, oh my god, I can't stand this kid who like doesn't understand anything about like women's issues. But Milk Tea was always like very understanding that I was young and I had drive and I had this fire and that I would understand eventually. And she was super welcoming of that. I also, and going back to Wife, he would go to West Virginia tournaments sometimes. And I remember he was like the only player I've ever met in Melee where I was like starstruck. I was like, oh my god, it's Wife, and he voted for me, and all this. So we played like a bunch of friendlies, and he was like amazed at how I would smash DI. And it's so funny, like even back then I was really into trying to learn smash DI as good as I could. But before any of that, there was a group of Northeast Ohio people. Like the first person I really learned Melee against, where I could see the game clearly, was against this Fox player named Minty. Mm-hmm. And he was friends with X, 4%, and this guy named Big John. And Big John was like my number one fan. He would always call me Goonies because I would wear a Goonies t-shirt like to every single weekly. And he was always like, yo, Laurel, you just gotta fucking do it. Like, just do it. And he was this like laser F smash Falco, like played so different from everyone else. He was great. He was hilarious. But the people I grinded the most with were a Falco player named Walt and a Pikachu player named his tag was 2 frames, but his name's Carson, so I'm just gonna call him Carson. Mm-hmm. He didn't play Pikachu until after Pichu Kid. So at the time he played like every character, and he was just like, he was so much better than me when we first started playing, but we would play Melee constantly. And his basement became like the hub of Northeast Ohio Melee grinders for the longest time. So that was like the first half. And then when I got introduced to Pittsburgh, it was like literally everyone there loved me, and they were extremely supportive, and they were willing to like defend me with their lives pretty much. So literally everyone in Pittsburgh was cool, and it was, you know, I had a lot of support like locally that really got me through a lot of shit.
Mm-hmm. That's really awesome. I wanted to touch on one thing. You're talking about how Milk Tea, who's a legend, shout out, they like saw like, okay, she's hungry, she wants to get it, and like, yeah, she's maybe young right now and she's not like really in tune with the stuff, but like she's gonna get there. I think that's like a very like wise thing to realize in someone. And you also had this statement earlier on where you said, you know, I joined Smash Sisters just like casually, or like, you know, just for fun, because I didn't understand the importance of it. Can you describe like the importance of those, like either, you know, the women who helped you, or the women in the scene, or Smash Sisters in general, and what it really means to you now that you've, you know, grown into the women that you are today?
Yeah, Smash Sisters was the fact it was like consistently at every single major tournament. It gave women all a place to meet each other and to hang out, to play Melee in a scene where it was like so sparse. After the first one, I tried to enter every single major I went to. I kept entering because people like knew me, and there were all these different women in all these different states that I was traveling to. And there were a lot of crew battles where I would just completely farm everyone, and there were women who would come up to me a year later and be like, you're like the reason that I kept playing, because I didn't know a girl could be so good at Melee, and that really inspired me. And I must have been like 16 when people would say that to me, and I was just like, huh, I guess I see it now. I see why this is so important, because you get to see like how good other women can be. And I think there's even like a study from Dr. Piggy, who like interviewed a bunch of women, who said that the number one reason for women sticking around in a male-dominated competitive space is because they find another woman that they can be friends with and like have that camaraderie with. And I realized like when she like published that, I was like, yeah, I had that, and I didn't realize it. And that's like most of the reason I stuck around. But just having a space for people who are a minority in the group, it's important to just have that and to support it. And I feel like what Smash Sisters was like the first thing that did that. And there was backlash, but Milk Tea and Emily Sun, who's like the other person who runs Smash Sisters, they were just like, no, we're just going to do it. We're not going to care what people say, because it matters more to the people who go to tournaments and the women who go to tournaments. like they are a part of this too, and we want them to have a chance to just like experience Melee in a way that they wouldn't have normally. And I carried that with me as I got older because I learned about like the Gaily tournaments, and I was like, okay, I really want to be a part of this and I want to support that because I understand having those spaces can just be so influential for people in those groups that really want to get in the scene that might not be as comfortable, that notice things around them and are like, like I don't like this that much. So you find like-minded individuals who have similar struggles, and it just helps grow the scene like way more. So I realize it now, like it was literally my way into any sort of like attention or like clout in the scene, and I respect it for so many more reasons than that now.
It's really interesting because you touched on something that is very true, which was there was backlash. There was a lot of backlash. I mean, it was at every level. People were either trying to take a pot shot or trying to say anything from it's sexist to it's not needed, it's wasting space, this and that. It's taking up setup. People would complain about setups again, and I think like it was just crazy. Like it was just so crazy.
You take like 4 setups.
Yeah, just a group of women playing Smash is like, no, and it's just anything like that you could do to try to detract the work that those women were doing. People would say it especially on Facebook. I would get every single take, and it was just terrible. And so
Facebook days were rough.
It was a really good point that you made where I think you said, like people like Emily, for example, were like, we're going to just keep doing this shit. Like, they realize that it's helping people. It's, they see tangible results. Like people are getting into the scene. People are staying in the scene. People are more welcomed in the scene. So we're just going to keep doing that. And I really, really like that, where it's like, you know what? Just because there's backlash from some idiots doesn't mean you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. And they had to stand up to a mob.
Yeah. It was bad.
The time. Even in high school, there was one kid who was like, who knew nothing about Smash Sisters, didn't know anything about Melee, and he had the balls to be like, oh, Sp1nda didn't even make it out of pools in Smash Sisters, like she's terrible at Smash. And I'm just like, I didn't even say anything because I'm like, dude, like you are so stupid and you have no idea like what you're talking about. And I remember there was another guy like on Anther's Ladder or something who like recognized my tag as Sp1nda because like I didn't Smurf back then. He was like, oh, you're Sp1nda? Like, wow, I should get flown out to Genesis because you're not that good. I beat him. And he was saying this to me. I'm just like, whatever, dude. And from then on out, I came up with like random tags for Anther's Ladders because I'm like, I don't want to deal with these people.
It's crazy. And I'm just glad that the right people won out at the end of the day, hopefully. I mean, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It was insane. I wanted to touch a little bit on Genesis because I do remember that you getting flown out and, like the ESPN article with Prague and stuff. And it was just super cool. I was just like, holy shit, we got someone on ESPN that's lit. You know what I mean? I thought it was hype. I thought it was sick that I didn't even know people could get flown out for Smash. I was a baby then, so I was like, oh my God, they're flying out people. This is where we made it to the big leagues. Like, this is it. We're going to be the MLB, and I'd love to hear like your experience of that because Genesis is such a sick tournament. So how was it for you?
I remember the year before, I was like, oh, I wish I could go to Genesis 3 so bad. It's perfect. It's on the right weekend for me. Like, I was a freshman in high school. And the next year, Genesis 4, back then, I feel like we weren't sure if Genesis was coming back because Genesis was gone for so many years. Then Genesis 3 happened. And everyone was like, holy shit, it's Genesis 3. And then Genesis 4 was happening. And we're like, oh, we have to see the storyline for Mango Armada. We have to see what happens. Like, it was this huge thing. And for the first time ever, they were doing a compendium to fly people out. And at that point, I think I had won like my first local tournament and I knew Phil. So I was kind of like, yo, I'm going to campaign for this and like try to, no, he actually convinced me to campaign for it and get votes. And I remember like, I just like posted something and then I like went about my day in like high school, like I was a sophomore. And then I would always check my phone in Spanish class because I didn't like my teacher. So I would check my phone and I checked and I was in like the number 1 spot for votes. And I was like, what in the world? Like, what is happening right now? And And, you know, eventually I think like KJH like snuck in there and like took the #1 spot, but I got voted in and I got paid for to fly out. I remember I would check the votes every single day, like repeatedly in Spanish class, because I was like, I need to know if I get in, I need to go if I get in. And I'm sure all these people who have had like summits of their own at this point, they know what that's like. That was totally new at the time, totally new. And I can't believe I got flown out for the very first compendium. That's crazy to look back on. And oh my God, that trip was an entire other thing, because we flew to Vegas because it was like $90. And then we drove through the desert, me and my mom. Drove through the freaking desert. But it was like during a really bad like downpour season for California, like record rainfall. Just my luck. It was brutal. It was a brutal drive. That tournament was just like, it was crazy. Like so many people were so excited to meet me, and I was like, that's crazy, because I don't feel like a good Melee player at all. Like I didn't do well in pools, and I was like, damn it, like I really wish that I could have like made more out of this like trip, right? But you know, then I did Smash Sisters, and that had a huge freaking crowd. And then I money matched someone who I had been like shit talking for like months on Twitter, like, and everyone was they were so like excited for this money match, because they're like, yeah, like these two really good women, like we're gonna finally see like who's better. And of course, like I win like 3-1. Like it was kind of obvious that I won, but there was I set myself up as the villain there, and it was like an entire West Coast. It was the Arizona crowd, which is like West Coast Pittsburgh. They were crazy. In my ear. They're so loud I couldn't see the TV in front of me. Like it was oh man, that was brutal, but I did it and I won. And then afterwards I kind of like apologized. I was like, you know what? I can't put myself in this villain situation all the time. I can't put myself in this position. I'm like, it's too much for me. And like, we squashed the beef after that.
Hell yeah.
And it was cool. I met a lot of really great people. I met a lot of great women there. And that was like, it's so weird, because I wanted that to be like, oh, this is my breakout tournament. But that was like just the beginning for me. It was literally my second major ever. And that was like the beginning of like this just dedication to Melee, I think, because I saw how much it could give back to me, and I wanted to stick with it. So
that's awesome. Well, I want to talk a little bit about where you're at today, because you were, you know, balling out at Riptide. You beat my homie Negative. Shout out Negative. Yeah. Beat him. Yeah, you know what I was saying?
I do.
It was funny because we were talking about Phil, and it was like, you know, a couple Michigan people and me in the background, because he's Negative is repping items on his jacket or whatever.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I asked him about it. I thought it was his podcast. I was like, is that your podcast?
No.
He was like, no.
No, I helped him a little bit getting out there, but it's not that hard from Michigan to Ohio. Shout out Michigan though. But it was like us, and then like Phil, and I think like TRT and a couple homies there, and you know, they're all rooting for you. We're rooting for Ohio, Negative, yeah. And like Negative's like, he got in his head a little bit, stopped missing like ledge dashes and stuff. And Phil looked at me, he's like, that's your boy, you know, that's your boy. I was like, that's my boy, dude, that's my boy. So I was like, when I found out I could have you on the podcast, I thought that shit would be so funny. But it was just really cool, like just how everything intermingles and intertwines. But going back to what I was saying, I think you got 49th at that tournament, right? But
yeah, and I could have done better, like honestly.
Yeah, I mean, you're balling out. People don't know.
Yeah, it blew me away. I was like, whoa, I actually could have done better, and like I did good already.
It was against J-Cam, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and it's just that I played in that tournament, I played so aggressive to like overwhelm people, because I'm like, I'm not nervous at all, and I know everybody else is nervous, so I'm just gonna, you know, go crazy. But that was like my downfall, is like I didn't play patient where I needed to, and I was like, ugh, whatever.
Yeah.
But well, it's funny that you bring up Phil like cheering for me, because I remember on the West Coast when I won that money match, everyone was dead silent, and Phil said words that will stick with me forever. He was like, oh, they're quiet. You made them quiet, Sp1nda. You made them quiet. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I need to relish in the fact that I can make people completely silent if I win, because it's like, yeah, that's right. Yep. Shut up. I won. Shut up.
That's actually so funny, because we were talking after the set with you and Negative, and it was like, because, you know, I'm sure Negative heard some chirping, you know, behind him and stuff. And so Phil was like, "Hey man, he'll learn. He'll learn how to shut him up one day. He'll learn. He'll learn."
Hmm.
I was like, "Yep, that's what you gotta learn. That's something you gotta learn because sometimes you go into enemy territory, you're gonna hear it, right?
Oh
Especially
yeah.
back in the day." But
Oh yeah.
one thing I wanted to touch on Riptide too, because your performance was great, but another thing that stood out was your commentary. Was that like your first like major block? And if so, how do you think that went? Is that something that you're interested in doing in the future? Because I thought you killed it.
Um, I did like side streams on the very first Riptide,
Hmm.
and I think I did better than people thought I would. So they were like, "Okay, we'll have you back next year, and we're gonna give you a few more blocks." And I was still kind of just on the side stream, but this year I had 5 blocks and a top 16 block, and that was definitely like the most I have cared about commentary in my life, about doing a good job, because there's been all this discourse lately.
Hmm.
And I remember like before Riptide, like no shots at Jorge at all or anything, but I was just watching sets with my friends and he would scream like at the top of his lungs, like lemon grab over very small melee interactions during like game 2.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh man, like I wish that I was commentating so I could tell him what's going on. Like not yell, not scream my head off. Like, because more power to him. He loves melee so much. And I have moments like that where I commentate where I'm like, whoa, oh my God, like holy shit. But I was literally like, I need to make sure my Riptide commentary is really good, because I know how much I know about melee. And I love to share that with people, especially just viewers, because you have such an important job as a commentator to be the voice, to make it more entertaining, or just overall a better viewing experience for the people watching without being like too distracting, without like, without causing any problems.
Yeah.
So I am very interested, like seeing the positive reception I constantly get from commentating. I'm now like, okay, I'm making a reel so I can actually apply to other tournaments than Riptide, because I get auto added to Riptide pretty much,
Hmm.
but I don't get auto added to other tournaments. So yeah, I'm making a reel, and I want to like think about my strengths and weaknesses, and use commentary as a way to like keep going to major tournaments, because I can't go to very many majors. I'm kind of broke and in college.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very interested in continuing that, just because it's like the competitive thing. Like I want to be a good commentator because I feel like I can do better, and I feel like all these things. And I'm sure there's tons of people who commentate, who play, who do anything in melee, who feel that way about themselves, and that they use that as a drive to improve. That's definitely at least what I do.
Well, I'm interested to hear what you think your strengths and weaknesses are in commentary, because I feel like commentary is such like a nebulous thing, especially in melee. Like, in Counter-Strike,
Yeah.
or it's very esports, very direct, very professional. And in melee, it's like the vibes, you know what I mean? And so I would love to hear like your thoughts on like strengths, weaknesses, things that commentators could improve on, things that commentators are doing right in the scene. Because there is a lot of discourse, like you said, there's a lot of discourse.
I think paying attention to like, you have to pay attention to like the flow of things, where you're at in bracket. Like, do you know anything about the people who are sitting down? You could talk about where they're from. You could talk about a little bit about their story, just to like keep people interested. I do think there are times where I talk too much too fast, and I will talk over my co-commentator. Like, they're not there. They'll try to say something, and I'm just like so into melee, like I just keep talking about it and I don't stop. It's almost like I need someone to tap me on the shoulder and be like, yo, chill. And then I'd be like, oh, okay, my bad. But I talk kind of fast. I talk kind of a lot. And sometimes I feel like I don't, it's a skill to learn how to, if you're with a commentator who's like not talking that much, or like not giving you a whole lot, it's a skill to like get them to talk. That's something I could work on. And, I don't want to, if I commentate doubles, it's hard to commentate doubles, but I do want to get better at that, just because I know a lot about doubles and I don't just want to say the same couple things over and over again. I also just want to improve my vocabulary. Like, everyone uses the same words to describe things. Like, the generic commentator will say like, yo, that was insane. Like, everyone says that. Or, like the classic nice back air.
Yeah.
There was some really good video I watched about Street Fighter commentary forever ago that was like, okay, but why is it a nice back air? Why is it a nice this interaction? Like, you should talk about that instead. One of my strengths, though, I think I work well with mostly everybody now. Before it was like I needed to be paired with someone who's willing to talk more than me, or else I won't stop talking. And I think that I understand a lot of the current commentators, just what they're good at and what they bring to commentary. So I will like work myself in there usually. But in general, I have more like baseline analytical style, I feel like, just because I like looking at small situations and being like, oh, he just did this super technical SDI into the stage, like tech, and then shined immediately. Like, that's what Armada does. Like, I like making those connections because I've been watching Melee for so long that I know where I'm able to make connections to like past commentary and like past sets really easily. So I really like doing that just because I've been around for so long. It's easy to do that.
Do you think that, you know, getting more into commentary is going to help your play in the next, you know, couple months or the year ahead? I honestly think it really helped me at Riptide, because when I was going into my set against Laud, I had already watched so many sets that were high level of the day. Like, I watched Zuppy versus Surmaris, and I was like really paying attention to his neutral game. And when I sit down to play Laud, I'm like, okay, I kind of want to do what Zuppy was doing. He was doing all this dash dance stuff, and I don't really use dash dance a lot in a good way against Peach, so I'm going to do that. And I managed to take a game off Laud just from like having watched really high level Fox Peach sets. Because for me, if I watch one set, I feel like I can take something away from it pretty easily, just because I put so much work into analyzing stuff early on. So yeah, I do think commentary helps me like perform better, weirdly. Even though like my schedule was full to the brim at Riptide, I guess that's my best win condition, is if I'm really busy and doing all this stuff. Well, so yeah, I think it would help for sure. I would love to get into how you balance that then, because I remember like I did very little commentary at like, you know, the regional Bodied, shout out Bodied. And I was like, man, this is too hard to commentate and compete at the same day. Like, I'm just exhausted. And so I mean, that is like, you know, homies and a couch just talking. That's not commentary. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like, you are like actually like doing professional type shit. So having to like balance that while still being, you know, a serious competitor, which you are, how are you able to do that? Does that drain on you over, you know, the course of a 3-day major?
It does. Like, by the time you're on Sunday, it's like, oh my God, like I am so exhausted from all this stuff I've been constantly doing. And it's honestly, it's even like hard for me to be in front of a camera all the time, because I'm like, there's so many opportunities for me to just like be an idiot or just say something slightly dumb, and then that's a Reddit clip for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of pressure, but I think I've gotten really good at just focusing on what's happening like right in front of me and dealing with that. Like, leading up to Riptide was a freaking stressful month. I had a very stressful month just thinking about everything that could go wrong at Riptide and just all this stuff. But when I was actually there, I was fine. I think it's like the saying, like, pressure makes diamonds. And I've been under so much pressure in the scene from all these different places that I think I deal with it, and I have turned myself into a person that can just take it and then move on to the next thing, because it's going to be over soon. And I've learned to appreciate it too, because I'm in my early 20s. Like, I think my birthday is tomorrow, actually. Like,
happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you. But I'm going to be 22 years old and I'm doing all this cool stuff. It's like, even though there's a lot of pressure, like, I don't really feel the need to be nervous anymore. I don't have too much anxiety when I'm actually doing it. So I tend to just focus on what's in front of me, and I also just appreciate whatever it is that happens. If it's positive or negative, I just appreciate that I got to do it, and then I move on like a lot faster. And there's always another tournament. There's always more opportunities for me to do it again if I want to. So I think I have a pretty healthy attitude to just like deal with it. And I always make sure to give myself my own time. Like for pools, I warmed up with Magi and Essie, and then I commentated, and then I came back to play. And, that was a good thing I did for myself. Just knowing where your limits are and knowing where to step in and prepare for what you want to prepare for. That is like the most important thing in getting a mindset like that. But it's also just like repeatedly being under the pressure. Like I've been around forever, and that is 99% of why I could just like do it like all the time now.
Well, that leads me, I guess, to maybe some stuff outside of Melee, which, you talk about this pressure is something that's come up multiple times in this interview. And I think it's really beautiful how you have this mindset of, like, this is a blessing almost. Like a lot of people wish they had these opportunities. So I'm going to make the most of them. Pressure makes diamonds. I feel that, you know what I mean? So I guess my next question is, how do you think that pressure in Melee and, all the things that surround it has helped you in your life outside of Melee?
Well, it's definitely made me a much more outgoing person. That's for sure. There was a time period where there was like drama in my life, and just like with people in the Melee scene, like I'm not gonna like give too many details, like because me and Carson are friends now, but we were like dating, and like we broke up, and that was like it kind of really split the community, and I didn't really feel welcome anymore. So it was like at the end of high school, and I decided to move to Pittsburgh and like start going to college, start doing more normal things. Like I stopped playing Melee. Like I was on my high school track team. Like I never would have done that if I hadn't like really put myself into Melee into a completely different world, and learned about myself and learned how to deal with pressure and how to take things and move on and just make the most of it. So like I did track in high school. There was like one tournament I went to during that time. It was in Columbus. And then I moved to Pittsburgh. And that's when Pittsburgh Melee was kind of winding down. So I didn't get many opportunities to play Melee. So I just started going to college, and I started working at this horrible, awful job that was so hard on my back. And it was like I worked with a lot of ex-convicts, like at a place called Restaurant Depot. So it was like I was the youngest. I worked with my best friend, which was cool. We have so many amazing stories we love. But that place was brutal. And then there was just like COVID hit, and I was still working. Like I was doing my online classes, and it was like, oh, this new thing. It was my first job. I was 18, and it was lonelier because I just moved to a new city. And there was just some point where I was like, oh my God, I miss playing Melee. Like I was like, wow, like in the real world, like Melee helped me so much. But now it was like an escape. I was like, man, I need that back in my life. I think Rollback came out around the same time.
Yep. Fizzy the Goat. Thank you.
Yeah. And that, when I started playing again, it was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I'm so happy that this is a thing. And then I started to do like really good for no reason. Like I beat Kage, who was my first top 100 win, and it was online. And I was like, oh my God, I just beat Kage. Like when I won, I was like, what the fuck? Like, I'm not supposed to beat these people. But that was it was just, God, I'm sorry. I just got really into it. I don't remember what your original question was.
I guess I was asking
how it like translates into the rest of my life.
Yeah, because again, you said pressure makes diamonds. Experiencing a lot of that pressure, how were you able to translate that outside of Melee?
Oh yeah. So I'll pull it back a little bit.
No worries.
Melee helped me actually go out and get my first job that was extremely stressful and like stick with it for, I think I worked there for like 6 months, which isn't that long, like in the grand scheme of things. But for my first job through COVID during college, I would bus there for like, I would take a really early morning bus. And it would take like 45 minutes to get to work. Like it was this serious, like just slog of a grind. But I stuck with it because I wanted to make the money, and I wanted to experience what that job had to offer me. And even though it was really hard, the fact it was my first job has made every job after that just like a million times easier. So like that pressure makes diamonds things. It's like I never made it easy for myself when I was younger. And now that I'm older, I actually appreciate that I did that, because it feels like everything's way easier because I know what the hardest stuff looks like.
Yeah. I want to do a quick, very small aside. I'm a big track fan. I ran track in high school and college, so I got to know, what events were you doing in track in high school?
I was pretty bad, so I wasn't like I did like the 400 sprint, the 100 meter, and the 200 meter. I was the best at the 200 meter, but God, I was so bad at the 400 meter. It was like embarrassing.
Let's go Sp1nda.
My coach made me do it.
Yeah.
My coach made me do it. She always made like the people who, I don't know. She just liked to make people who shouldn't do the 400 do the 400.
That sounds like a track coach. It sounds like a track coach. The amount of times I had to do a 4x4 when I'm like the 2 mile guy, I'm like, why the hell do I have to do this? But it's for your speed. And then the sprinters have to do the 4x4, and it's like, it's for your strength. It's like, oh my God,
that's ridiculous. Nah, my coaches wanted to like win and prove that our team was better, so they didn't go that far. But,
yeah, I love my coach. Shout out Coach Rich Brown, Tumwater High School. I wanted to go a little bit on the pressure makes diamonds thing as well. I want to know your mindset because, again, you said how pressure is a blessing. You're happy that you put yourself in these scenarios. When do you know that it's a little too much for you? Like, when do you know, like, okay, I need to take a little bit of a step back. Like, I'm putting myself under too much pressure.
It took so much for me to realize that. It actually took like literally like a kind of a scary and shocking like psychiatrist appointment where I had been like just freakishly paranoid. Like I was having some like auditory hallucinations, and I was in general just like really isolated. Like after COVID, when I moved back from Pittsburgh, I came to Ohio, and it took me forever, but I went to a psychiatrist, and they're like, yeah, like we think you have like schizophrenia. And I was like, what? I was like, I kind of knew because like, my partner at the time had been like really encouraging me to go see somebody. But I realized like that pressure was creating like a different me in like the worst way, because like stress is really bad if you have a psychotic disorder like that. It's really bad. And I started to see like the world like completely differently from how I used to. And I was like, man, like what is going on now? Like I used to be able to handle all these things, and now all of a sudden I can't. Mm-hmm. So it took a lot of like, you kind of have to swallow your pride and just like, you just go deal with your mental health, and you see like what's going on like internally. Like it was just like, it was not easy, and it was not kind. It was more like I had to have like a pretty serious diagnosis mm-hmm. in order to be like, okay, now I have to really pay attention to if I'm putting too much pressure on myself and if I'm overly independent, because I was like that for a really long time. I would not really share things with my family, would share very few things with my friends, very few close friends, which is, I think they say it's like kind of typical for someone with like a schizoaffective disorder to be like that. Mm-hmm. But after that, I kind of forced myself to, and I had to quit my job because of it, because it was just so much stress that one day I just stopped showing up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, this is really affecting my life. I have to deal with this just entirely outside of, in completely different part of my life, just nowhere related to Melee, was like getting really bad because of like the pressure I would put on myself with Melee. So, I mean, I had to learn to open up to the people around me and let them get close to me and tell them things about myself, because I hated talking about myself to the point where I would just like make other people talk and I would listen to them like all the time. Mm-hmm. But it was like, it's not a fun answer, because it's like, oh, this basically random thing happened to me and I now have to deal with it for the rest of my life. But I realized it basically because I had like just put way too much pressure on myself. It's like I broke almost, and I had to learn to like pick the pieces back up and to just really learn how to live life in a way that just accommodates like not what's wrong with me, but just something that I now have to deal with that developed in my life. Mm-hmm. So I unfortunately, I didn't stop at a point where I was like, okay, I know the pressure's too much. It was more like I had to have someone like wake me up and be like, hey, you're doing way too much. You're putting way too much pressure on yourself. So honestly, like the way you realize you're putting too much pressure on yourself, you're pushing yourself too far, is when your friends are starting to tell you like, hey, like your close friends that you really trust, they're like, hey, I feel like, you're having issues here. Like, what's going on? Talk to me.
Mhm.
And if someone's like, talk to me, you probably need to, like, there's probably something going on in your life where you need to talk about it and you need to maybe step off of it a little bit or just step off of yourself.
Yeah. Well, I really want to say thank you for opening up like that, because I think especially
Yeah,
after COVID. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's just that I've spent a lot of time just like trying to talk about it more openly, just because I feel like it's this really weird thing that's very stigmatized in our society, and that makes it a million times harder.
Mhm.
But it it doesn't like weaken me. I know myself better now, and I know how to deal with a lot of things better now. So I don't feel like stressed to talk about it anymore. I used to, but it's like the more I talk about it, the like better it gets, I feel like.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think COVID for me personally really expanded how ignorant I am when it comes to mental health issues. I think like, we were all talking about it and shit like that. But when COVID really hit and that isolation hits and you don't get to see your homies, you don't get to talk it out.
Mhm.
Like that shit hurts, you know what I mean? And you got to learn a
Yeah.
lot about yourself in ways that you didn't think you were gonna. And so I really resonate with that. And I think it's really beautiful that you're stepping up to the plate and, being who you are unabashedly. I think that's really important. And I think it's important obviously outside of Melee, because, this shit is way bigger than Melee, but it's
Yeah.
also important in Melee because I know people who put so much pressure on themselves in game, and it's analogous to what they do outside of the game, and I could see how that breaks. And I know how mental health issues, especially as an African American, like it's sort of a hush hush topic. And so I think people talking about it more in their experiences is always a fantastic thing.
Hmm.
I want to move on a little bit, which is a question that I ask a lot of people, which is legacy and perception. I'm always interested, especially in the days of social media, especially you who have been through a lot of public perception, whether willingly or unwillingly.
Yeah.
What do you want your legacy to be in Smash? I mean, I know that you're, young and you're still grinding. You've been in here for a while though, but you're still
Yeah, I
grinding
am.
and you're still doing your thing. But do you have any like important things that resonate with you that you want to be perceived as, I guess?
I think that a lot of what I want, I have enjoyed just being like the local legend. Just I really like right now. I think a lot of people like of the active players who go to locals and stuff that I am like clearly the best. That I really love that because I love my local community and having their respect matters so much more to me than like the respect of the rest of the world. Like I want to be remembered as like that random kid who took all those stocks in Smash Sisters. I want to be remembered as just someone who would show up and make like a crazy upset, even if I'm not, even if I never get to top 100 level. I would be perfectly happy just being like knowing how good I am personally and being able to exceed my own expectations like whenever the opportunity arises. Cause when I had chances as a kid, like I just wasn't good enough yet. I wasn't experienced enough yet. But now it's like, I want to be known as just like someone who really put everything into Melee, who I've like has done a lot for the local scene, who, I kind of was one of like the trailblazers for like women to come into the community later. And I would love to just leave that like legacy, just like all this focus on there's a huge focus now on the grand scheme of Melee and like there's more celebrity stuff. Like obviously without Summit, it's a little bit less like that. But people care so much about the top players. I want to be just known. Like I would be comfortable being one of the people who was like in the Smash doc, right? They were pioneers. They were competitors. They, you know, choke sets against top players. They did all these things. I would be totally comfortable being like that in like 10 years. Like just I could be like the new wife, you know?
Yeah.
You know, maybe with a few more like wins under my belt, but like I would be totally. Actually, I don't even want to say that. Wife is really good at Melee, honestly.
Yeah, I feel the sentiment though. I understand what you're saying. You're a competitor.
Yeah.
I feel you.
Yeah, I would just be comfortable like local legend, like I did all these things and like that's who I was for a while. Just because when I'm old and I have kids, I want to be like, check this out. Look at this article I see. You're not gonna believe this, kiddo. Like I'm gonna keep it a secret for like till they're like 13 or something. I'm gonna be like, check this out.
That's awesome. That is really awesome. I have one more question, which is like, or one more question on Melee, and then I want to ask you a couple things about your hobbies and interests outside of Melee before we wrap up. But I guess my last question on Melee related things is, you know, diversity in Smash is something that's really, really important to me. I want to see more Black people in the scene. I want to see more Latino people, more queer people, more women. You know, when it comes to women in the scene, you know, we're seeing an influx definitely where it's like we see players like Magi, you, Essie, Moth. So like more women at the top level, but we're also like, it's also important to me to bring women of any levels in the scene, just because it just makes the scene better. I feel like just having more diverse people. So I don't really give a shit if it's, you know, an Owen tour or if it's someone like you or Magi. I just want more women in the scene. So as someone who, you know, helps out in the Michigan scene, I want to know, like, what are some things that I could be doing to help bring more women into the scene?
Well, I think a big part of it is to treat them like you would treat a new O2er coming into the scene, and also, but with maybe like a grain of salt of like sensitivity, and know that like they're probably not going to be comfortable with you right off the bat, but everyone has that moment in Melee where they're the only one. They're by themselves in the venue. They don't really know anybody. Things look a little cliquey from the outside. Just like inviting them in to just like play friendlies, to or even just talk about Melee. Ask them how their bracket was. Because I see this a lot at Barlucci. Like we've had a lot of new people, and I just try to be as welcoming as possible. Like even if I like play them in round 1 and I like destroy them, I will talk to them just like a friend, you know. I'll just ask them normal questions like you normally would. So I think just treating it like that is the best way to welcome them in, because you don't want to overcompensate and be like, yo, like I'll teach you how to play Melee, like just hit me up sometime. Yeah. That's too much. That's way too much. It's more just like creating an environment that they want to keep coming back to. And like for some people, they make themselves the center of it. They're like, yeah, I will help you personally get into Melee. Like, no, you want to create an environment that they like coming back to keep playing Melee. So that's what I think, at least.
Awesome. Well, that answers my question perfectly. I appreciate you answering these questions, because I think, like, obviously they're helpful for me in general, but I think they're helpful for the scene, and that's why I'm trying to ask them, right? I want to move on a little bit. We focus on stuff both on and off the sticks here in Items On. I want to learn more about you as a person. Like, what type of hobbies are you into? What's the stuff that you're watching? What type of music you're into?
It's so... I always, when I get asked this question, I'm like, I'm all over the place. Like,
that's awesome.
At least right now, I'm really into Super Animal Royale, which is like this free battle royale game. It's like 2D, and it has a lot of movement tech. And me and all my Melee friends, we will play that. Like when they're working from home, they'll be like, we need someone for animals. I'm like, all right, I'm there. And I love playing that game so much. And then right now, I've just been, I work at Barlucci now, which is awesome. I will go there and I like hanging out with everybody. I've been really into just hanging out with people and just talking a lot. So being able to work there is honestly like the best possible thing for me. And, you know, I go to college. I just got my associates in science, which is awesome.
Congrats. That's awesome.
I didn't even realize I got it. Like, it just came in the mail and I was like, Mom, I got a degree. Because I'm going to be the first person in my nuclear family to like graduate from college. So that was like huge for me. It's just another pressure thing on myself. I really wanted to go to college and finish because neither of my parents could finish. And I'm pursuing a nutrition degree because I really like the idea of just like helping people in the future, like with their nutritional choices, because it's really hard in America. There's a lot of food companies really like to mislead people. And when I learned like just to the extent it could go, I started pursuing that as like a career because I was like, it would be so awesome to help people who are all unique. They all have their own issues with like food, to eventually do that in the future and help them with that. Cause it's such a like finicky thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I'm just good with finicky things. So that's why I wanted to pursue that. And music that I really like everything, but I only listen to CDs that I have in my car. Like I have a bunch like lined up right here, but I don't want to move my camera because it's kind of messy. It will break.
Yeah, I feel you.
But lately I've been listening to, I love the Cranberries. They're literally like my favorite band. I never stop listening to them. That album's always in my car on repeat.
Mm-hmm.
But I like a lot of like old school like rap and R&B, like a lot. I love it. And then there's like just random like indie stuff that I love that I will listen to. And I'm really into Mitski. That's like my top two, has to be like the Cranberries and Mitski. Like if you looked at my Spotify, that probably has to be the only two that I play on Spotify. But I don't know. I like being open to new things though. I don't limit myself to just any one thing. I guess my current hobby, like outside of Melee, is like I love trying like new random candy or like fast food items that pop up like at the fast food places around here, which is funny because like I'm supposed to be a nutritionist in the future, but it's like I love, like I just tried the loaded nacho burger thing from Wendy's and I was like giving a review on why it was so bad to my friends, how I did not like it at all. I just love being analytical about stuff like that, being as direct as possible. So that's technically my hobby outside of Melee right now, at least.
You'd be surprised how many people have said that, like they do a little food review to their friends or like a video or something.
Yeah.
Like I interviewed Wizro. He's like, I'm into that. Like I want to like talk about, and he like talk about like how he eats like he's like hot dogs are like one of my top 5. So he's like, I'm interviewing, like reviewing these hot dogs and shit. I was like, hell yeah, you know. I wanted to touch on.
Me and Wizzy have
ahead.
a lot in common.
No,
me and Wizzy have so much in common without even like realizing it.
No, he's the homie. Shout out to Wizro.
Oh yeah.
It was funny because I had to play him my round 2 at Riptide. So he was like,
Oh,
aren't you the
that's
guy
so
who interviewed me? I was like, yeah. And then he like tech chase destroyed me game 1. I've never been destroyed like that in my life. I was doing so good. Defensive option Sp1nda. You would not believe the defensive options I was doing. And he was still 0 to death me. I was like, how do you know I'm going to slide off here? How do you know I'm going to ledge dash and you're just going to grab it? I hate you. But levels to this shit.
Yeah,
That's what I learned.
He's so good. Yeah, dude, God, yeah. I've been there. It's recorded like from Smash and Splash, actually. Like the pre-Riptide. He did the exact same thing to me.
I feel so much better. I was like disconnected. I was like, the hell am I doing out here? And I felt like lost at sea. I wanted to ask you a thing because you're talking about CDs. I just recently got into CDs. CDs are broken. You get like so much cool stuff and it's so cheap at your record store. You can find like some random CD for $5 and it's like 14 great songs. I was like just so taken away when I got my first like CD player and stuff. Like, how did you get into CDs specifically? Just like in your car?
My car had a really nice CD player, but before that, my friend Shay I have the exact same sound system that he had because I loved his CD player so much. And because I would hang out with him and he would be like, yo, what do we listen to? He'd pull out this big folder of like CDs. And even then, like that would remind me of when my dad would, my dad used to make music, like techno style music. And he had binders and binders full of CDs. And I loved like the feeling of just like flipping through the pages and seeing all these different albums. Like and if you know nothing about them, you just stick one in and you listen to it, you see if you like it. And it's more of an experience than just like streaming a song, because you have to know the song you want to play or know the album. With a CD, it's like, oh, like what's on here? Okay, I'm gonna play this. My friend Shay really got me into that. Really, I think exactly what it was. He played like a live Pearl Jam CD that his dad gave him, and I was like, this is so awesome. Like, I need to get my own CD collection because I love physical media like that. I have a crazy like Godzilla VHS collection too. So it was just like the next step. It was like, okay, for music, I'll do CDs. I didn't want to do vinyls. They're too big and clunky, but CDs are nice and compact. You can just put them on a shelf.
Yeah.
But I just love physical media, and I love music, and just CDs are so cheap. They're the cheapest thing that you can buy. Like vinyls are kind of expensive. CDs, freaking $4 Cranberry CD.
Yeah, it's so sick. There's definitely something about the physical. Like, I don't know what it is, but just like, like the cover album art means something more. Like looking in the back, like a lot of the CDs too, they used to have like those little slide-ins, or you get to like, they had like for rap, they would have like the lyrics sometimes or some shit like that.
Yeah, I have a couple different ones. Just to show you, this is one of the Michael Jackson.
That's fire. That is fire.
And it has like this glitter. It has like it has an unreleased like music CD in it, and also just like the regular album. I love that. And then there's these ones that are like, well, this is a Tyler.
Nice.
This
great album.
It's like, and it's like wood, not wooden, it's like paper, and then like you just get like all the art like that you never get like if you're just streaming a song. Like it's so cool. I love it so much.
Yeah. I have one of my like favorite things that I own are these albums from Alayu Mesfin, an Ethiopian artist from back in the day, and they're vinyl, but it's like the slide out and the art, it's like I feel so like connect, even though I don't know the guy at all, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's like, damn, this is so sick, you know? So I definitely feel that. Well,
yeah, I love that.
I would love to ask you like a million more questions, but we run out of time, unfortunately. So it's been absolute pleasure getting to ask you all these questions. Thank you so much for coming on. If you have any shout outs or anything you want to plug, this is your time now. You can do whatever the hell you want, so go for it.
Shout outs to Critical Hit Esports for getting me through everything, because I didn't get the chance to like bring up their names and everything. But all of Critical Hit Esports, and to the Barlucci family, of course, because they have made the recent months like so much better for me, honestly.
Yeah.
Barlucci's the best. I love it.
Shout out Barlucci.
I love it.
I got to come out one day. I know it's like Michigan, Ohio or some shit like that, but who cares? It's Midwest solidarity when it comes to Barlucci. So
oh yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you one thing actually before we go, which is like, I'm a Midwest person. You're a Midwest person. I feel like Midwest is sort of coming back up. You know what I mean? Like we're starting to.
Oh yeah.
So like, how do you feel about that Midwest fire coming back?
I'm so ready for it, because there's been too many times where it's just been East Coast, West Coast, East Coast, West Coast. But now the Midwest, we have really come up, and I get to watch, hopefully, what is like the renaissance of the Midwest coming here shortly, maybe a big house.
Yeah.
I hope we one day get our top player in the top 3 of a super major.
Yeah, it's going to be super hype when that happens.
Awesome.
I feel like we got a bunch of people like ready and able, and they're going to break through. And I feel like Ben did that a little bit at Riptide. That was hype.
Yeah.
Shout out Ben.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, shout out Midwest. All right, well, that's it. Thank you so much for listening. My guest today has been Sp1nda. I'm Ethiopium. Thanks for listening to Items On.